Hello students, we are going to begin our second lecture on the topic Political Theory, chapter Freedom. Last class we have discussed about the meaning of freedom and what are the different dimensions of freedom and role of a society that has to play with the concept of freedom. Now we will going to begin with the sources of constraint, as we have discussed in last class as well, that why there be a need of constraint, limitation, restriction on the concept freedom. So let us see. So the different sources of constraints are domination and external control. Such restriction may be imposed by force, or they may be imposed by a government through laws which embody the power of the rules over the people and which may have the backing of force. And you have seen, or you have example of this form of constraint as colonial rulers over their subjects, or by the system of apartheid in South Africa. Some form of government may be inevitable, but if the government is a democratic one, the members of a state could retain some control over their rulers. That is why democratic government is considered to be an important means of protecting the freedom of people. But constraint on freedom can also be result from the social inequality of the kind implicit in the caste system, or which result from the extreme economic inequality in a society. And the quotation from Subhash Chandra Bose on freedom draws attention to the need for the people of the country to remove such constraint. So we can categorize the sources of constraint basically into three subdivision. Domination, it is imposed by force. Then you have external control, that imposed by a government through laws, that is colonial period. And then you have social inequality, caste system, class system, economic inequalities. All these combined together, directly or indirectly, affect the concept of freedom. Subhash Chandra Bose has very, in a logistic way, defined the freedom for himself. If we are to bring about a revolution of ideas, we have first to uphold up before us an ideal which will galvanize our whole life, and that ideal is freedom. But the freedom is a word which has varied connotation, and even in our country the conception of freedom has undergone a various of evolution. So by freedom he means all round freedom, that is freedom for the poor, freedom for rich, then freedom for society and freedom for individual, freedom for men as well as for women, and freedom for all individual and all classes. So he categorized the freedom into different strata of the society. That freedom is for rich, poor, men, women, individual, all classes, all societies, means freedom meant for everyone. You cannot take it away from anybody on any ground of discrimination. This freedom implies not only emancipation from political bondage, but also equal distribution of wealth, abolition of caste barriers and social inequities, and destruction of communalism and religious intolerance. This is an ideal which may appear utopian to hard hearted men and women, but this ideal alone can appease the hunger in the soul. So, all the ideals given by Subhash Chandra Bose may appear to us as utopia, so idealistic, so perfect, but this is the only way. If you look out the different dimension he talked about, this is the only way can help out to remove the differences and provide freedom and equality to all individual. So next we have to discuss about need of constraint, as it is very important. Like rights comes with responsibility, as freedom comes with restriction. No individual living in a society can hope to live without total absence of constraint or restriction. It is very important to understand the co-relationships between the individual and the society. So why we need constraint, and why it is, we can call it as an advantage for others to have constraint. Why? Because if you want to enjoy your freedom, there has to be certain limitation on other freedom, so that the other person cannot overpower or cannot try to violate the rights of others. No one can live with absolute freedom. They need to have some constraint on the freedom. So let us understand, why do we need constraint? We cannot live in a world where there are no constraints. We need some constraints, or else society would descend into chaos. And obviously, when different people living together in a society, differences may exist between people regarding their ideas and opinions. They may have conflicting ambitions. They may compete to control resources. There are numerous reasons why disagreements may develop in a society, which may express themselves through open conflict. So obviously people having different views, different perceptions, and due to that differences, people conflict because they want to prove their opinion, their views as the rightful thing for the society, and others also want to do the same, but this cannot happen, and due to this, chaos usually create in the society. You can take the examples from your surrounding. Like we see people around us ready to fight for all kinds of reasons, ranging from the serious to the trivial. Rage while driving on the roads, fighting over parking spaces, quarrels over housing or land, disagreements regarding whether a particular film should be screened. All these and many other issues can lead to conflict and violence, and this may perhaps even created or may have even loss of life. So due to all these conflict differences, we need to have a system to control these violence. So therefore, every society needs some mechanisms to control violence and settle disputes. So long as we are able to respect each other's views and do not attempt to impose our views on others, we may be able to live freely and with minimum constraint. So it's very important to give space to other views and opinion. It is not always necessary to fight over the concept, to fight over the views. What we only need to do is to accept, to tolerate the views of other, so that we can avoid any kind of chaos and violence in the society. And that can only happen with a system of mechanism, a system of control, or a system of restriction, limitation on our freedom. But we may ask one question, that where we can develop this system of mechanism to control the people. And we can do such system when we create such a society that too requires some constraint. At the very least, it requires that we be willing to respect differences of views, opinions, and beliefs. However, sometimes we think that a strong commitment to our beliefs requires that we must oppose all those who differ from or rejects our views, and we see their views or their ways of living as unacceptable or even undesirable. Under such circumstances, we need some legal and political restraint so that differences may be discussed and debated without one group coercively imposing its views on the other. Worse still, we may be confronted with attempts to bully or harass us so that we can conform to their wishes. If so, we may want stronger support from law to ensure that my freedom is protected. So, due to the differences, situation may occur like that somebody maybe wants to impose their thought, their beliefs on us, and in that situation, we need the legal and political restriction, limitation on that person who is imposing their will on us. And why we need that? So that our freedom must be protected. And if you want the protection, then there should a need to have limitation, imposition, control of constraint on freedom of others. For understanding freedom, in your book, there is a concept of liberalism is given. Let us see. When we say that some parents are very liberal, we usually mean that they are very tolerant. And as a political ideology, liberalism has been identified with tolerance as a value. Liberals have often defended the right of a person to hold and express his and her opinions and beliefs even when they disagree with them. But that is not only that there is to liberalism. And liberalism is not only modern ideology that supports tolerance. What is more distinguished about modern liberalism is that it focuses on the individual. For liberals, entities like family, society, community have no value in themselves, but only if these are valued by individual. They would say, for example, that the decision to marry someone should be taken by individual rather than the family, caste or community. Liberals tend to give priority to individual liberty over values like equality. They also tend to be suspicious of political authority. So liberalism, when we talk about modern liberalism, it basically give more priority to individual, their views, their thought. means individual is free and the other entities are associated with it. Historically, liberalism favored free market and minimum role to the state. But present day liberalism acknowledges a role for welfare state and accepts the need for measures to reduce both social and economic inequalities. So modern liberalism talked about the welfare state, where the economic and social inequality should be removed by the measures taken by the state. So let us recapitulate what we have discussed in today's class. We discussed about the sources of constraint, that it can be imposed, it can be by force, domination, or social inequalities that may exist in form of caste, class, economic differences. Then we talked about the need of constraint, why we need constraint on our freedom, so that we can accept the value of tolerance to avoid differences and chaos in the society. And if the limitation will not be imposed on the freedom, then people will start using their freedom as an absolute value, and freedom cannot be given as an absolute concept or absolute value, because then in that situation the situation of the society may turn as a war place, because nobody will going to listen, respect or tolerate each other views, differences, interest. Everybody will try to impose one's another will on each other, and in that situation you cannot enjoy your freedom. So restrictions are important. And there are some assignment question for you, that what are the different sources of constraint or freedom, why do we need constraint, what is the role of political and legal constraint, and discuss the views of Subhash Chandra Bose on freedom. Thank you class, and have a nice day ahead.